Hi, this is Jill Ciminillo. I'm the managing editor for Pickup Truck Plus SUV Talk, and hey, look at this. This week I actually have a pickup truck. So we are checking out the 2021 Toyota Tacoma, and first off, I want to say I really like this color. Because we've already looked at this vehicle and we've looked at it in several different ways, what I'm going to focus on in this review is what it's like to drive it as a petite female. So I'm going to be looking at driving position, seat comfort, and the easiness of getting in and out of the vehicle. Now, Tim and I are probably going to have very different opinions about that, so I'll be curious to know what you think. So we're going to take a closer look right now. First things first, let's start with taking a quick look at the engine. This is a 3.5 liter V6, and it'll deliver 278 horsepower and 265 pound-feet of torque. Now, this is a four-wheel drive version because this is the TRD off-road. And EPA estimates that you should get between 18 miles per gallon and 22 miles per gallon. So 18 would be city, 22 would be highway. I'm going to tell you right now, I have not been getting either of those numbers. I drove this vehicle from Miami up to Orlando and was going at highway speeds pretty much the entire time. And I averaged about 18.8 miles per gallon. So I think 22 miles per gallon was pretty optimistic. But overall, I want to say that this engine does fairly well. Now, the vehicle is heavy. It feels a little heavy. You know, acceleration is not as, smooth, fast, and seamless as maybe you might want. But I think it does really well, and I didn't struggle. I had no problems merging with traffic, and I was fairly good in fast on and off the line starts. So overall, feel like this is a pretty solid engine, but your fuel economy, you are not getting 22 miles per gallon unless you're hypermiling, and who's going to do that in a pickup truck? Well, except for maybe Tim. Okay, so while we have the engine compartment open, I figure it's probably worth looking at what's going on in here, and I'm going to tell you right now, some of this stuff is going to be hard for me to reach. You've got the washer fluid, which is right here, and this compartment's super easy. Now, the dipstick is back a little bit. I can reach it, but it's going to be a little bit awkward, and I'm wearing white pants, so they're going to get dirty because I'm definitely leaning up against this truck. Now, in terms of if you would need a jump, your battery pack is right here. It's also reachable. But I'm going to tell you, anything else beyond this area, I am going to need a ladder to reach or a step stool. Tim has graciously sent me pictures of step stools that I could be using. So I would need those for the rest of this. But the dipstick, the washer fluid, the battery, I can reach without the step stool. Now, before we power up the vehicle and we look at some of the interior features, I would like to talk about this for a moment. Tim had mentioned to me that there was a little bit of controversy about how people get in and out of the vehicle, that this slopes too much and people have to duck and, they're hitting their head and it's just not easy to get in and out of. Now, again, I'm going to point out I'm about 5 feet tall. I weigh 95 pounds. I have this seat in the far forward position and it is all the way in the pumped up position. Now, when I am trying to get in, there are no running boards. So I do have to do like a little bit of a step up, and there's no handle here for me to pull myself in straight. So I do have to lean over and grab the wheel and kind of pull myself forward to get in the vehicle. Now, that was a very awkward thing because I'm also, I've got the sound controls attached to my back pocket and I was trying not to bump anything. But so I do have to duck a little bit to get in, but it's more because there's not a hand grip here than because of the fact that, I feel like I'm gonna hit my head. I have to reach in, I have to grab the steering wheel and then pull myself in. There are no running boards, there's no hand grip. It's not a problem, but it's not as easy as if those things were present. So I don't have a problem getting in. Again, I'm in a far forward position. I'm relatively close to the steering wheel, but let's even do this again. I'll try to look a little bit more natural. So as I'm gonna get in, of course now I'm thinking about it too hard, but as I'm gonna get in, I have to reach forward, and then I kind of swing my butt around to pull myself in. Now, if there were running boards here, I would probably do a step up, and then kind of go in more head first. And I do have to do, like if I were gonna go like this, I have to do a little bit of a sideways shimmy to get in, to make sure that I'm not hitting anything and that I'm not, you know, hitting the wheel either. So, okay, this is a little bit of a tight space, but keep in mind, most people who are getting into this vehicle are going to be really, really far back. So, one moment, please. Let me push the seat into the far back position. I think that opens things up a lot more, and my sound thing is falling out. But I think that opens things up a lot more, and I think it gives you a little bit more headroom to pull yourself in. So again, I'm ducking, but it's more because I'm grabbing the steering wheel than it is because of this. But I'm short. So, all right, so now I'm gonna flip the camera around. We're gonna look at the interior and some of the technology features that are available on the 2021 Tacoma. All right, let's power up the Tacoma. All right, before we move on to some of the tech features, I do want to just spend a little bit of time talking about the interior and maybe turn that fan speed down a little bit so you can hear me. So here we go. We do have an analog display for the speedometer and the tachometer here, but you have this little screen here that shows a couple of items, and you can page through what you would like this information to display. You know, there are some options as you scroll through. So you use this button here and then this here to kind of scroll through the various items that will display there. Personally, I enjoy having the information screen up just so that I can, you know, have an idea of where my fuel economy is, where, you know, what I've done so far in terms of fuel economy. Yeah, like I said, on the highway I was getting 18.8. Now I've been in the city and idling a little bit, so I'm getting 18.4. But this doesn't bother me. I think this looks pretty good, and it's what I would expect for a truck. All right, so looking at the rest of the interior, you have a smaller screen. It's still, I mean, it's like an 8-inch screen, I would say. It's not super duper small, but it gets the job done. It works fine. This has some of the up-level packaging on it, so you will notice that it does in fact have the navigation system, and it has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It is a wired-in system, and I can't show you that while I'm actually recording and talking, so I'll shoot some B-roll and put it over this. But this does have Apple CarPlay. It does work really well. The Waze integration is really good. I used that to drive from Miami to Orlando, and it did really well. So, you know, and then you have the map screen there. Something else I want to point out before we leave the screen is this also has the around view monitor. So you have a button over here that you push to bring the camera up if you are in park or if you're in drive and you just want to see what's going on. So you pull this up, and in addition to having the around view here, you have the rear facing camera, or the front facing camera there. And then when you can change your views by pressing that button, it shows, you know, the sides of the vehicle, and then obviously it brings you back to your map screen. Now, if you put the vehicle in reverse, it will show you the around view monitor and the rear of the vehicle. So, you know what? Let me bring that up again in a second. I think this is a good display. It's a little bit small, but it still will give you an idea if you're going to clip the corner of the vehicle when you're trying to parallel park or get into a parking space. It'll also show if you're centered. But the resolution is a little fuzzy. So it's not a high resolution display, but it'll get the job done. So, and this is not a luxury vehicle, so I'm not particularly bothered by the fact that it is not high resolution. All right, so let's talk materials. The seats here are leather, and they're kind of a stiff leather, but I think they look good. I like the little square pattern on it. This is an up-level option, and I think they look relatively good. This here is kind of a interesting material. It's not plastic. but I'd say it's more of a vinyl, and it has like a little bit of a padding to it. And so I like the soft touch to it, but then, you know, you're going to get into your harder plasticky materials here. And again, for a truck that's not luxury and it's not the limited trim, it's not the top tier, whatever trim, I don't know that plastic materials really bother me. You know, it's got a solid feel, and again, you just, oh, and here's that kind of like the soft vinyl-y material again with a little bit of padding. Yeah, so, I mean, it is what it is. I will point out that this vehicle does have an automatic transmission, but a manual transmission is available with the Tacoma. That means this is a truck my husband could possibly own. Unlike the Tacoma, I do feel like I have a much better driving position in here, and you will notice I have really a couple of inches between my knee and the steering column, which is what was posing a problem for me in the Tundra, is the distance between the steering column and then, you know, when I took my foot off the brake and, you know, moved my foot, I was hitting here. So I don't do that on this. So definitely a much better driving position in terms of how I fit in the vehicle. I wanted to flip the camera around because now I want to talk about seating comfort a little bit, because this is another thing that I'm not sure that Tim and I are going to agree on. I feel like these seats are actually pretty perfect. I spent 4 hours straight in the driver's seat, and I didn't feel like that the seats were too firm. I felt like it was the right amount of support, and really I felt like they kind of cupped me and held me into place, and didn't, you know, I didn't feel like I was sitting on concrete. I've driven other trucks over longer distances, and I get out of the vehicle and I'm like, ugh, I feel like an old woman. And all right, maybe I am an old woman, but I didn't feel that way after getting out of the Tacoma. You know, the side bolsters are present, but they're not too big. I don't feel like I'm struggling around them. But, you know, it's the seat bottom itself that kind of contours to your thighs and to your butt. And I think this is probably one of the more comfortable truck seats that I have sat in recently. So I definitely like it. I like the seating position here. And I spent 4 hours here, and I could have spent 4 more here. Not that I ever want to drive 8 hours straight anywhere, but I could have done it sitting in this seat. And the other thing I'll point out is, you know, these headrests are not egregious, and there's plenty of opportunity to like move them up a little bit. But a lot of times, like, I'll be sitting in a seat and like the headrest pops up like 4 inches over my head. And as you can see, this is just a really, for me, a right size seat. So I can see how maybe Tim or somebody who's taller might not find this seat super comfortable. But if you have a woman in your life, she will thank you for it. The driving position, the seating position, you know, the seats themselves, I've got to give it 2 thumbs up. Now I'm going to spend a quick minute looking at the back seat of the Tacoma. And as you can see, behind my driving position, I can almost put my leg out straight. There's plenty of leg room here. Oh, sorry, Toyota. There's plenty of leg room here for somebody to really have a luxury limo-like experience. But even if you come over into the passenger side, where the seat is more suited for an average sized adult, you know, there's still plenty of foot room and knee room here. Now, the thing to know is there are 0 amenities back here. There is no USB charging ports. You know, there are cup holders, but they aren't gonna really hold anything in there very well. And they're really, you know, I guess, no, that's not really an air vent, but you do see vents coming through underneath the seat. So you're really not going to get a lot of amenities back here. There's no sunshades. There's a lot, you know, some plastic materials. You do get that vinyl-y material again with the padding, and you have your window up-down button, but that's it. So I don't know that anybody's going to want to spend a lot of time back here. Certainly, probably not kids for a road trip. And I will say that these seats as well are also a little bit stiff and not super comfortable. You know, they feel a little bit more firm and like I'm sitting on cardboard here. So, yeah, so not a lot of stuff going on back here. Before I wrap this up with some driving impressions, I want to point out one more interior feature that I like, and it is this right here. Now, when we were in the Tundra, you will remember that whole rear window opens, but in the Tacoma, you get a little mini version, and with the push of a button, it slides open. So I like that it's not a manual operation. I like that there's a button to push, and it adds a little more flow through of air. All right, so the bulk of this video review is on driving in Florida, and I was in the city and suburbs and doing a lot of on-road driving. In fact, I drove from Miami all the way to Orlando and had plenty of time on the road to check it out. So, had the opportunity, I'm in Texas, I figured this would be a great ad. So I'm going to interrupt this regularly scheduled video to bring you some off-roading in the Tacoma.
Yeah, that's what we're doing here.
And bonus, we're gonna see how much I can throw Tim around in his seat.
I promise not to throw up my camera. But we have a TRD off-road, so we have locking rear axle, we have the crawl control, and the multi-train select. And so there's a bunch of features Toyota Trucks does, and I'll link to a video I did with the chief engineer where he kind of explains A-Track, kind of explains the crawl control, that kind of stuff, so that way you can understand what all these features are, because when you're off-roading, you typically throw it in 4 low or 4 high and just go for it. You don't always understand what all these different features do. Like rear locking differential. Yeah. Masterclass today. And not so masterclass. Ivan Stewart's walking around. If you've known into the Toyota heritage on off-road racing, he's a legend. Get it, get it, get it. So, I mean, that's really what this truck's built for, right? That kind of mud situation, rock crawling situation. Yes, yes it is. It's fantastic. So, a city perspective you had was driving around, having enough room to see around you in this truck as far as parking. Mm-hmm. And an off-road perspective, how do you think it's doing so far as far as seeing?
So, I mean, one of the things I always do when I do off-road, especially in longer vehicles, I tilt my mirrors back towards the rear tires. So, I mean, that definitely is good. I noticed, I mean, the hood is definitely high. I wish I were pumped up a little bit higher in the seat, because I am doing, you'll notice a little bit of this as I'm trying to see, because some of these turns are not blind turns, but there's some obstacles, and it's just making sure that I'm hitting the path the right way, and that you know, on one road there was two-way traffic, so making sure that I'm not gonna, you know, hit anybody.
Yeah, I mean, you have some sloped in lines on this hood, but it's not as dramatic as, say, the Bronco is.
Correct. In terms of driving impressions, I want to say that I think that the Tacoma has been one of the more comfortable trucks that I have been in recently. I really like the seats. In case you missed that, I've already talked about that extensively. And I thought the visibility out of all of the windows was pretty good. Now, obviously, there's going to be a little bit of a blind spot because of these big, chunky side mirrors, but thankfully in Florida there aren't many crosswalks that I have to, you know, bob and weave to look through. But so that is going to be the one thing that I'm going to have to watch for. The A-pillars are fairly small and slim, so they don't create too much of a barrier. It's primarily those side mirrors that cause me a little bit of visibility issues. Now, the roof line is a little bit high, and if I'm parallel parking, I'm definitely going to be depending on those cameras a little bit more than I normally would. But all around, I feel like the visibility out of all of the windows is fairly good. On the highway, the Tacoma is a little bit rough. I'm not going to lie. The engine is loud. You know, you're hearing a little bit of wind noise coming in, and the cabin is not super quiet. But this is a pickup truck, and maybe you don't expect those things in a pickup truck. And it's not a luxury pickup truck. So I think all of that is reasonable expectation. I was very pleased with the Apple CarPlay and the operation of that. I will point out that I did make a phone call to my husband while I was driving from Miami to Orlando, and he said the call quality was pretty awful. Frankly, I think the words he used were, "This is the worst thing I've ever heard." If you were, and it was not via Bluetooth, I was wired in and made the call through Apple CarPlay. So if you're going to plan on talking on your phone a lot, that could potentially, the sound quality isn't great. And I will say that him over the speakers was also a little bit tinny. But I mean, this is a more compact truck than some of the other trucks I've driven recently, so it's fairly nimble, even if it's a little bit heavy. And again, when I was talking about the engine, I mentioned that it did really well with merging on the highway and doing the maneuvers that I needed to do while I was on the highway. So overall, I think that this is a very comfortable situation, good driving position, reasonably comfortable on the highway and over any bumps and rough-hewn surfaces, but definitely on the louder side in terms of ambient noise creeping into the cabin. So while I won't give it 2 solid thumbs up, I will give it, definitely 1 thumbs up, and then, kind of like maybe a sideways in terms of driving impressions. But I mean, this is a truck, and I think it's pretty much where you would expect to be without adding a lot of luxury finishing touches. All right, it is time to say goodbye. I feel like I should do this so long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, adieu, but nobody really wants to hear me sing. So I'm just gonna say so long. And until next time, I will see you down the road.